Greetings YouTube, welcome back campaigners. If you're new to the channel, welcome, hope you learned some things. If you're familiar with the channel, you'll notice I've done some things a little different with the backdrop and the lighting and things like that. Still experimenting. Let me know what you like, comments, you know how it works. So I need some buildings for a desert campaign scene I'm running, and I couldn't decide on what to build. So I started with what a lot of people build, which is your basic square sandstone-y thing. As you can see, this looks a little too like Star Wars, especially when you plunk one of the little domes on top. I even, at one point, had tried to go really modular with this so that they stack up if I needed to. You notice there's some problems with some of the veins on them, things like that. But not too far off the mark, just a little small for what I need. So I have come up with a larger, more realistic building. I've used things from TV, movies, artwork, and reality, and come up with a prototype hidden behind my little shield here, and I'll show you that at the end, but we're going to jump right into the build. So welcome, my name is Cross, this is Campaign Terrain, and I'll see you right after the jump. Thanks for coming. Jumping straight in, I'm basically prototyping this as we go along. This is just teaching myself as I do. So for this project, because I'm going to want it a little bit rocky and sandy on the outside texture anyway, I'm going to use the PIR foam, which is the thin insulation foam. It comes with the two pieces of foil on the outside. You got one on both sides of the foam. Here's a better example. You see, oops, that's a better example. You see it's got the foil on both sides, and that just peels off. Now, don't need one this big, so let me show you how easily this cuts. Same process as before. Hold the knife at low, shallow angle and drag through. Usually, this stuff goes through on the one shot because it's really easy to cut. It'll still dull your knife like the others, but the knife goes right through it. So, again, PIR foam, but anything you want to use will work. So, you can use EPS, that's the stuff with the little beads in it. You can use the XPS, that's the insulation board from the sides of houses or underfloors. You could even use EVA foam, that's the floor mat foam. Though it's a little more flexible, you'd probably need an internal support system to keep that a little more rigid. But you could use those if you wanted. So, show you how easy this stuff is to peel. Sometimes you end up with these little pieces of paper on there. If that's going to be the inside of your house, it doesn't really matter. But just in case, I'm going to go ahead and try to peel that out. Now, a lot of times, especially near the edge, you'll end up with these holes. So obviously you're going to have to work around those. So PIR foam in other countries comes in a much more solid version, but we don't seem to get that here. So I'm just going to have to work with what I've got. And for right now, the paper will be fine. Let's try getting the metal side off. Now they're both foiled. One's just painted white. So you're going to have the same issue on both sides. Sometimes the paper doesn't want to come up. Sometimes it'll come right off. There's probably a way to steam it or something like that where it comes off really easily, but I haven't found it. I just work with it. And all this is going to get a texture over it when we're done. It just doesn't like to stick to the foil, which is why I'm taking that off. The paper's not going to be an issue. So let me finish this up and I'll be right back when I've got a couple of pieces ready to cut. Okay, I worked on some previous prototypes before, but I thought they looked a little too much like a certain space movie. And even though they don't have a dome on the top, they have a raised area where the hot air could go up to. I was thinking of making this like into a sort of pyramid shape, or I'm not sure, having some openings, but I've changed the design on this a little. I've also realized that while the older styles of figures, the figure will fit in there. They won't with a base, and the newer styles won't at all because a lot of them tend to be a little taller. So what I'm going to do is make it tall enough that it's not only tall enough for them to get through a doorway, but even higher than that, because I want there to be a walkway on the top with a railing around it that is part of the same wall. So I want the wall to come up that high. So previously, this was 2¼ inches tall from here to here. I think I'm going to go with a full 4 inches, and you'll see why as I build a little further. So I want to take some strips off of this that are 4 inches wide. First I got to get this squared up, and that's pretty basic. You can use a square like this kind, or a speed square, which is what this is, or just follow the grid on your mat if you've got one, however you want to do it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and line the pre-manufactured edge up with one of the lines on my mat, and then I'm going to take square, press it against that pre-manufactured edge, and use the far side of it as a straight line. You want to make sure that you get your blade vertical, and I save these for bricks, rubble, things like that. So again, I'm always saving my offcuts. Now this is PIR. Do not use a hot wire on this. Do not use a hot wire on this. Do not use a hot wire on this. It releases bad things. Do not use a hot wire on PIR. Okay, so now I've got my clean square edge. I want to mark that in 4 inches. So grab a pen real quick. My 4-inch mark. And a 4-inch mark. Then I can take that. I realize you can't see my marks from there, and I'm really right-handed, so you're not going to be able to see that, but trust me, I got it right on the mark. There you go, nice clean cut at 4 inches. Now, as you know, I tend to gauge everything rather than measure, so since I've already now got a 4-inch piece, I'm going to take it and cut another 4-inch piece off of the board by just using this one as a line, as a straight line to cut with. So, like that. Now, if there is an error, it gets worse if you cut from a piece that's been cut from a piece that's been cut from a piece. So I'm using the same piece over and over as my guide. Then close my pen real quick. As I said, sometimes you get these crummy pieces like this. Just work around those. I didn't cut all the way through that time. There we go. So now I've got several pieces, all 4 inches wide. All these can make walls. So now I have to decide how wide I actually want the building. Now previously, keep in mind that I've got to work around this thickness of wall because I want to keep these walls, because if I ever create a playable interior, I'm going to have it fit those walls, and I want to take into account these big thick walls. Now these are designed this way in a desert because the thicker walls keep out more of the sun's heat. When the sun is bearing down on it, the inside doesn't get as hot, and in the evening, when the sun drops down, it can get very, very cold, and these will then radiate the heat back into the house. So there's very often very thick walls like that on desert dwellings. So I do want to keep that thickness on here. And as you see, that's a pretty small room. If you look, that is 2 3/4 inches across. Now, by D&D standards, an inch is 5 feet, so that's 3/4 of 5, 3 and 13 feet across. By my standards, this is, I use 1 foot, 1 inch equals 4 feet. So at 2 3/4, this is exactly 11 feet. So not a very big room. I'm going to go a little bit wider. I'm going to go 3.5 inches across, and I'm going to do about probably 8 inches for the inside of the house long. I'll do the math and make it easy on myself. I'll make it 4 by 8. So I want Now these walls are pretty close to a 1/2 inch. These dots on here are a 1/4 inch apart. So I've got a line, dot, 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 line. So if you look, this foam is almost exactly a 1/2 inch. So I want to take that into account. So if I want the entire structure to have an 8 inch interior, it needs to have a 9 inch exterior because it's a 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch. So if I want it 4 inches wide, that's got to be 5 inches. So what I'm looking at is 9 by 5. So I want to make sure that I have a piece, again, starting from what was that straight machined edge originally. And that was not a very pretty edge on that. So what I'm going to do is take off a 1/2 inch on that just to make it a nice... I'm going to fill it all in with plaster. I'll leave it. This is a prototype anyway. So I want to cut this at 9 inches long to get an 8 inch interior. Now this is a foot wide on the square here on the board, so I know that this is 9 inches right here. So I can just line that up, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, again, just gauging, I can take that, place it on the other one, and that's both of my long walls. Now, I'm going to want a 5 inch piece for this other one, same principle. That's cut for my walls. Give me just a second, let me figure out where I'm going to put my doors and I'll be right back. Okay, first, if you're paying careful attention on that last round, you caught me, I made a mistake. I said these are supposed to be 5 inches wide. They don't need to be because they fit between the other ones. So these are 4 feet by, 4 inches by 4 inches square. So that's 4 inches wide, 4 inches tall. I measured out my doors. That's the width of a wall and then the width of a wall again in. So that's essentially an inch in. And then I took the same 2 walls that I stacked them here and drew the line, so it's about 1 inch wide. Made it about 1 3/4 inches tall because that fits Mr. Pointy Head even with his helmet on. At least if you don't take his base into account. So I'm gonna leave it at 1 1/4 inches. Inch 3/4 inches. So that's my 2 doors. They're both on the same side of the building because in the desert there's lots of high winds. Eventually this is going to be built into a sheltered courtyard with a wall around it, and so it would be less of an issue. But as I'm still going to build it as if it was a freestanding building. So I only put the 2 doors on the one side so that the desert winds don't just fill the place up with dust. Presumably they would know which way the prevailing winds come from, and they're going to point the back of the building that direction. I'm also going to have some vent holes, but they're only going to be, they're not like windows. They're only tiny holes and they're up high so that the dust doesn't blow in, so that the hot air from inside can vent out. That's a common arrangement all over the world, and I presume it would be that way on Fantasy Worlds. So there's going to be a few vent holes, like one above each door and then another one about halfway, high enough up that the wind wouldn't blow sand into them. These are not going to have full doors. These are going to have curtains that hang on the inside, like a flap that hangs down, almost like this is a rigid tent, except it's going to be essentially a concrete building. I also took the liberty of going ahead and figuring out what height I want my roof to be at. So it's going to sit right there, which is going to leave me about a 3/4 inch lip, which is going to be just about waist height for these guys, so they're never going to fall off the thing. But if they needed to, it's high enough that they could duck down behind it if, say, they were under attack. So let me go ahead and make some marks on here. Let me show you what I did. I decided I wanted 3/4 inch down. I marked it, and I drew a line. Now I'm just going to use this as a gauge. This is a roof. It doesn't need any lines. So I'm going to take my other wall. This is going to be the inside. I'm not going to bother trying to get all the paper and everything off. So 3/4. Then I can just take my other piece or the square, either one, and line it up along that line, and that's going to be where my roof comes up to. So give me just a second. Let me finish doing that. I'll be right back after I've got those done. Okay, this is the front of the house. This is the back of the house. These are each of the sides. On all of the insides, I've marked where I'm going to cut the windows. Now, I put 3 marks on here on the front, but I noticed that that's only going to leave me about a 1/4 inch gap between the bottom of this window and the top of this door. So there's going to be a hole like right here. So what I'm actually going to do is, since there's already a door on this side and there's already plenty of airflow, I'm just going to put 1 window in the middle, the 3 on the back, and the 1 on each side. Now, obviously, this knife, a little big for that. I've got some thinner ones, but the blades aren't really the right shape. You could probably do it with that. You could probably do it with a toothpick by jabbing enough holes in there, however you want to do it. You can make the hole, but I'm going to go ahead and use one of these hobby knives. Now, this is not your standard number 11 blade, like the typical X-Acto blade, but I don't have a sharp one of those. This one's pretty close. So all I'm going to do, excuse me, is go around and take each of these holes and cut out each of these squares. And I'm just going to follow the inside of that line and knock out each one of these, and then I will be right back when we're ready to start gluing some walls together. So I took the liberty of jumping ahead a step. I've glued on the side walls. This is the front wall and left when you're looking at the front of the house. This is the back wall and right when you're looking at the front of the house. I just put a bead of hot glue down. I always use it on low temp. I don't know that it would melt this foam, but let's not get high temp. I know you're not supposed to use hot tools on this, so I put 1 bead down and glued it into place. I made sure to keep it square using one of my upright squares here. Then I took the gun and ran a bead from the line at the bottom of the ceiling down to about a 1/4 inch up, just in case I ever want to put this on a platform, or oops, sorry, let me get that camera. Put this on a platform or mount that so that it'll sit on a base. So I did the same thing here. Pardon my ugly glue job, but it'll get the work done. So from just below the ceiling in. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take my roof and glue it onto one side, and then I will run bead glue and put the other piece onto the outside of it. So I'm going to run through that. I'm going to leave that on, but I'm probably going to speed up the footage for you. So you get the idea. So that's it glued up. I'm going to make a couple of these seams meet up a little cleaner and get it straightened up a little, finalized for you, and I'll be right back to show you the final prototype. Okay, so there's my prototype of Desert Building Type 2. This was where I started. As you can see, made a heck of a change from here to here. Much difference in scale. Got a place to put figures on top. One last thing to do as far as the figures on top go. I need a way for them to get up. So next week I'm going to have next week I'm going to build a courtyard around the house, and then the week after that I'm going to texture it. So for right now I need a way for the figures to get up here. So I'm going to cut 1.5 inch gap right here, so that I have a spot for them to step up from the stairwell I build for to attach to this later. So this is about a 1/2 inch thick back wall. I'm going to come out to about the 2 inch point. And all I'm doing to get that gap is literally just cutting the gap. So take that down to the roof line, and then I'll cut this off. You'll see it next week. So that's about it. Stick around after the bump and I will show you this. I'll talk again about next week exactly what's coming up and idea for where the total build is going. See you in just a sec. there you have it. We've come a long way from star buildings to starring buildings. We've still got a long way to go to superstar buildings, but this is a good start. So this is my prototype, and it's just that easy. You've seen everything you need to see on it tonight. There'll be a couple stills at the end. Let me show you real quickly what I'm going to be working on over the next few weeks. So, can't use the building standalone, or I have created little yards for it. These all have walls, keep the wind off, keep the sand out of the houses. So as you can see, that fits right in there. I've also got some sort of stairs mocked up to go on the side of the house there so you can get up to the top. I'll have a little bit better version of those. I've got some prototype entry-level crops here that can fit inside the walls of the yard. So those will be going in something along these lines. As you can see, it all fits together. So all modular, except for the frame wall itself, and all working together or separately and independently of each other. So next week, I'll be working on a better version of this. It's just a prototype of this yard. And then after that, I'll be showing you how to texture and paint all of these walls. And then a little bit later on, I've got some other desert plants I'm going to be working on, but I'll also be working on these modular crops. So stick around, and I hope to see you then. Thanks again for coming. As ever, this has been Campaign Terrain. I am your host, That Guy Cross. I love you. I really appreciate you coming, so please like, share, and subscribe. Let all your friends know if you've been enjoying this. And until next time, I wish you all the luck in your campaign. Thanks, YouTube.